Hello and welcome to Ward Talk, CTN's look at the political scene in Ann Arbor. I'm your host, Bonnie Gabowitz. We'll be discussing issues and solutions with the City Council members from our 5 wards each month. Joining us today, this month, is Erica Briggs from Ward 5. Welcome back, Erica.
Yeah,
I
thank
haven't
you.
seen you in a while.
I know, it's good to be here.
So it's great to see you. This being the beginning of summer, we've got a lot going on, and I know some things are new and some things are continuing with some updates.
Yep.
So I wanted to start with something that's relatively new, and this is the idea that the city promotes what we call circular economy. And I understand there was just a decision made about some putting out curbside free items. So first of all, what's circular economy? I know it has to do with the environment.
Yeah. So the idea behind the circular economy is that we want, you want to think about goods from kind of the beginning of their life cycle to the end, and you want to keep things, sort of keep rotating them through and get as much life out of them as possible.
So this particular, in the past, there was people could get ticketed for putting out their own things that they want to donate.
Yeah, and so this was actually something that I was not aware of before I came on City Council. I've always been the sort of person who's picked up something off of the curb, and if there was something that still had some good life on it, I'd put it back out on the curb to give away for free to neighbors.
And usually, when something is out there with a free sign, it disappears pretty quickly.
Exactly. And so, but I started getting reports that folks were getting tickets about this, and in fact, a resident of the 5th Ward reached out to us, myself and Councilmember Cornell, and said, was frustrated because they had, thought they were doing something good for the circular economy for the community, and placed items out for free, and they had gotten ticketed. And it's not something that we were proactively ticketing, but when Community Standards gets a complaint from another resident, it's basically complaint driven.
A complaint driven.
Right. And so this is a practice that we actually want to encourage in our community, but putting private things on the public right of way actually is sort of challenging to figure out an ordinance around.
Plus, we don't want to have a neighborhood looking
blighted.
junky.
Exactly. So there's a lot of considerations there. So we think we came to a sort of a good middle ground in the sense that folks can put out items for 48 hours for free. They need to label them in some way to indicate that they are available for others. And they can't be large, bulky items or upholstered or toxic items.
Yeah, and I have a list I'd like to mention.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, these items cannot come out: freezer, refrigerator, mattress, upholstered furniture, water heater, cleaning agents, and any hazardous materials.
Correct. Yep. And we discussed that, and obviously some of those items are items that you still would want to keep circulating through the community if they still have good life in them. But places like Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or Ann Arbor Buy Nothing are good places to be able to get rid of larger, bulky items. But those smaller items are wonderful ones to be able to put out on the curb.
So I know there was some discussion about when people could put it out. There was some discussion that maybe the 48-hour period should be only on weekends, but then the majority vote was that it could be any time during the week, but it could only be 48-hour period per week per household. Correct?
Yeah. And so we were debating kind of the best way to go about doing this. From an enforcement standard, it would have been easier for Community Standards if it had just been over the weekend. From a community perspective, I think this was driven by a desire that folks don't often know what our ordinances are, and they're trying to do something that's good. So we didn't want folks getting a ticket because they put something out on a Tuesday. But yes, there is a limited period of time that folks haven't. You can put something out, and then you need to bring it back in if somebody doesn't take it.
And this will definitely help the environment.
Yep. And it's a great thing for community as well. I think it's a good community building activity.
We have a topic that's been ongoing for years, and that's the Gelman plume. And I only mention it when there's some kind of update, there's some kind of news. It's been slow going, but we do have some promising news in that the EPA has now labeled it, it has a Superfund site caliber, which means it has good standing and being on the way to be considered a Superfund site.
Correct.
So could you please explain more about that?
Yeah, so obviously we've been dealing with this Gelman dioxin plume for decades now, and it is running under the township, running under the 5th Ward, runs right underneath my house, and we've spotted high levels of 1,4-dioxin now in West Park. And so we've been trying to litigate as a city and ran into some issues most recently in the court as well in terms of our standing in that case.
Is that also affecting parts of Scioto Township?
It is, yes. It is affecting Scioto Township. In fact, some folks are not able to access their groundwater for wells anymore. And so it's certainly been a long-standing issue that we've been trying to get cleaned up and have run into many issues in terms of litigation. But we kind of took a dual path approach, which was one, pursuing our own litigation directly, and then secondly, petitioning for this to become designated as through the EPA as a Superfund site.
And what made this more complicated, if I'm correct, is that the original owner of the company that caused this pollution was sold to another entity.
Yeah.
Did that complicate things?
I think, and actually I'm not sure that I know the far enough back history to know if that was a major issue, but certainly our polluter pay laws, the lack of them in the state of Michigan has been a major impediment for us to gain traction on this issue. And so, and also the standards that we've had in terms of what is a dangerous level of 1,4-dioxane. So it wasn't until recently that that standard was lowered to 7.2 parts per billion in the state of Michigan, and actually the national standard is lower than that. So there's sort of a designation around, questions around what is the safe level of dioxane. Obviously, we're making sure that this does not enter the water supply in Ann Arbor. We're protecting the residents, but we want to make sure that for the future that that's the case. So in terms of what you were asking in the EPA designation, we've gotten, the EPA had back in 2016 or 2017, I think, said, we're not sure that this is actually going to qualify for designation on the national priorities list, and we just have received indication that they actually think that it may qualify, which is a positive step forward. And it's a slow and tedious process to get designation, and if we do get designated, it would be an additional 4 to 6 years after that before we would understand kind of what would the cleanup standard be. Would it be different? But it does demonstrate, it's promising.
Does the city have a schedule of periodically checking certain areas to see if the plume has spread further?
Well, and that's been one of the points of debate actually, is where those monitoring wells should be. So there are monitoring wells in place to monitor the groundwater. We have wanted, and we've been part of the litigation, was to have monitoring wells that were closer to the river that would provide early detection. And that was kind of one of the pieces that we no longer have. We had been trying to push for in the last fourth consent decree, but we are certainly, there is monitoring that's happening. We can determine how we can move forward with those monitoring wells, separately, and we are monitoring regularly to make sure that our water is safe.
So what happens with the houses that can no longer use their wells? Are they now hooked up to the public water system?
To municipal water, yes. Yep. So that's and that's something that's required out of previous consent decrees as well.
And just to give a little timeline, if this goes through, the next step is to have it labeled. They're looking at the fall of 2024 of having a decision, and it's subject to approval. And there are some federal hoops that they have to jump through with also public response. So this is extremely complicated.
It is, and when it gets to a point of a public comment period, if it does look like it's going to qualify, that will be certainly something that I'll be sharing with residents, and we'll be sharing as a city with residents that this is the time to speak up and share with the EPA your interest in making sure that this gets designated, because of course there will be other interests suggesting that it should not be designated.
Yeah. Okay,
Yep.
so it might be a while before we have another update on that.
Yeah, it will be.
Yeah, okay. And in just the minute we have left before the break, I wanted to talk also about the traffic stop policy that just changed just recently. So let's just start with exactly what the change is in terms of, you know, what precipitated even looking at changing the policy. And
Right.
What is the policy?
Yeah, and so we've just gone through the first reading on this. Councilmember Cynthia Harrison, who's from the First Ward, introduced this as the lead sponsor, and it's basically changing how we enforce minor traffic offenses, and we can kind of go into what those are later. But essentially, it would, instead of allowing the police department to stop folks for those offenses, people would just be mailed a ticket.
And I understand there was an independent study done looking at previous years and what the stops were and what the racial balance was of who was being stopped.
Yes.
And there seemed to be definite evidence that it was skewed.
It was, and it's important to note that this ordinance change is not in response to those findings, but the timing is good.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So this was a research study that was already underway and had been going on for a couple of years, but we know for a variety of different reasons that traffic stops are dangerous, particularly for people of color, and traumatic. And so
Plus it ties up traffic.
right. So there's a lot of things, a lot of reasons. Yeah, a lot of reasons. But primarily this is being facilitated as a way to make sure that that particularly for people of color in our community, that we are conducting we're making sure that we don't pull people over for sort of unnecessary reasons.
And just some examples would be like a cracked windshield, registration plate outdated.
Yeah, a broken tail light,
yeah.
loud exhaust, which we might want to talk about as well when we get back from that break. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. We want to hear from you, so please email us questions to ctn@a2gov.org or tweet us at #CTN in Arbor. We're taking a break now and we'll be coming right back with more from Ward Talk.
Veterans Memorial Park includes the Veterans Memorial Sports Complex, featuring an outdoor pool and indoor ice arena, lit baseball and softball diamonds, tennis courts, a 30,000 square foot skate park, meeting room, and a park shelter available to rent. The area was originally known as the Washtenaw County Farm Grounds. The park was given the name Veterans Memorial Park in 1955 in honor of veterans of the U.S. military and is commemorated by a memorial located at the southwest corner of the park. Volunteers play a large role in helping with maintenance and beautification at the park by removing litter, planting flowers, weeding, mulching, maintaining gardens, and helping to facilitate fun events at the ice rink. The Veterans Memorial Sports Complex includes a regulation-sized rink of 85 feet by 200 feet with spectator seating for 800. The facility's meeting room is available to the public to rent for birthday parties, holiday get-togethers, business meetings, and more. Outside, there are maintained paths, a seasonal sledding hill, and a ballot box located at the pool and ice arena parking lot. For more information, visit a2gov.org/parks.
hello again. This is Bonnie Gabowitz for Ward Talk. We're speaking with Erica Briggs from Ward 5, and we have been talking about several important topics, but we haven't quite finished talking about, we were just talking about the traffic stop and some
Right.
changes that are being made. So what else can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so it's important to note why we're making these changes, and obviously, criminal justice reform is something that has been a large topic for the last couple of years, and it's important for us to be evaluating what our policies and practices are to make sure that we are sort of leading with best practice and making sure that our residents and our police officers as well are as safe as possible. So there are a number of different these are sometimes called pretextual stops, this category of stops, in the sense that they are relatively minor offenses. The tag on the license plate that's in the wrong spot, or a broken tail light, or a cracked windshield, or loud exhaust that might, in some cases, that might not be the primary reason for that individual being pulled over.
Right, and it's something that's not necessarily a dangerous, like someone who's speeding is creating a
Correct.
dangerous situation.
Correct.
Someone with an outdated tag
Right.
doesn't make it a dangerous situation.
Correct. So they shouldn't be public safety risks. But sort of nationally, there's pretty strong evidence that that these have been often bias stops, or there can be racial profiling that's involved. And so what we're trying to do is to make sure that for these minor offenses, some of them are still ones I've heard quite loudly from, no pun intended, from residents, that loud exhaust is something that they find to be pretty problematic. There was a story in the Detroit Free Press recently about, for a very low cost, you can make your vehicle much, much louder. And so it doesn't.
Louder?
Louder. And so people they are. And so that's something that can cause, it's bad for quality of life. And so it's not that we don't want, there aren't situations where we might not still want to ticket people for these offenses. But there's nothing that somebody can do in the moment to change whether their exhaust is loud or their taillight is fixed. If there's some reason to believe that an individual needs a ticket for this item, then a ticket can be mailed to them. And loud exhaust is certainly one that I've heard clearly from the community that we want to make sure that we continue to address. And I've confirmed with the Ann Arbor Police Department that they're not looking at this sort of change as sort of, we don't want to enforce these topics, but rather we're just going to change our method of sort of interaction. So
I have one question.
Yeah.
Was there any involvement or input from the Police Oversight Commission dealing with this issue?
They were certainly, it wasn't led by them, but they were informed that it was going on, and what we heard very clearly from current and past leadership was strong support for these changes. What has come from them and we already discussed it, was the research project to take a look at our own police stops and to determine, is there disparity in the types of stops that we're doing? And we just got that report actually mailed to us as City Council today. So I was just reading through it, and I haven't read through it comprehensively, but I was, got the highlights and some of the big pieces. And what we're seeing is that there is disparity in terms of who is stopped, and also for these minor offenses. So while this ordinance wasn't based on this study, it's good timing in some ways, because what we're seeing is that white drivers are less likely to be stopped, and non-white drivers are more likely to be stopped based on their sort of presence in the population. And the study doesn't go to try to determine why this is. It just looks at, is this happening? Mm-hmm. And it is helpful to know, when I was reading through the study, that the stops that we do for these minor offenses are actually less than what you see nationally. I think it was, 2.4%. I'm gonna have to, yeah, 2.4% here. And nationally, or I guess the statewide average was 3.4%. So, and it's been as high as like 14% in some states. So, you know, we're not seeing as large of an issue as some communities are in this, but that doesn't mean what is concerning is what we're seeing in this sort of these racial disparities of who is stopped and then who's searched.
Mm-hmm. And on a related topic, we are looking at new information about crime on the uptake in the area, and another part of that is non-police intervention of problems that do not really involve violence, but are required for police to respond. And I know there's been a lot of discussion about that. So let's just talk about what's happening with crime in the area. What is the latest report?
Yeah, so what we're seeing is that there is an uptick in criminal behavior, in crime, in Ann Arbor, and also nationally. This is not unique to us, but when I've been talking to the police, when I've been talking to social service providers, the Delana Center, and other places, what they're seeing is folks with more acute and more severe issues, both sort of drug addiction, alcohol abuse, and mental health. And so maybe it's not surprising that coming out of the pandemic, many of us were struggling, but certainly for those who are on the margins, they're also struggling.
So there have been more incidents that involve intervention.
Yes, and we've seen an uptick in issues in the downtown. We've seen an uptick in issues in parks in proximity to the downtown. So I represent the 5th Ward. West Park has been a point in that area, has been a point of discussion for residents, and we're seeing serious issues in the areas. And some are violent, and some are not. Some are nonviolent.
Do you know? This might not be a question you can answer. Does the police force have a full capacity of all positions?
They don't. Just like other police
Really?
forces, they are understaffed right now. They have a hard time recruiting. So this is, again, not unique to Ann Arbor. Police forces all across the country are having difficulty as folks are retiring. Encouraging new folks to come into policing, and so and making sure that new police force that we do hire is sort of diverse and representative of our community is a priority for us. So in terms of how we're trying to address these issues, we want to make sure that we have a holistic and kind of comprehensive response to it. So obviously, police response is an important component of being able to respond to some of the issues that we're facing, and the police are responding. But we also need to address be aware of the fact that some folks really need mental health care. They need intervention in terms of the addictions that they're facing.
So is there any movement on the part of the city to develop some force, some group of people who can deal with these issues other than the police? I know it was starting to be looked at, but is there any movement on that?
There is, and in fact, we just got through a phase where we had brought in a consultant, had studied kind of how the community wanted to address the formation, if there was support for an unarmed crisis response program that would be leading a sort of a mental health response. And there was very strong support in our community for this. And so we just at our last council meeting released an RFP for a third party to come in and provide that service. So it would be something.
Well, that's a great step.
Yeah, it's huge. It's something that would then complement the work of what the Ann Arbor Police Department is doing, what the County Public Health Department is doing, and fill in a missing gap in our community.
Great. And we have a few minutes left, and I know everybody has been reeling with the weather and the storms and the lack of electricity. So I was hoping you could update us on what is the city doing to work with DTE to make sure, you know, we don't keep having these outages that are so difficult for our home, you know, our homes, and losing food and money. What is the city doing about working with DTE?
Well, I mean, we're certainly communicating to DTE what the issues that residents are facing. We've seen a massive power surge that happened in the 5th Ward that caused tens of thousands of dollars to some people's homes. It was a much more powerful surge than what folks ordinarily deal with, but we're also seeing frequent outages. And so while, you know, DTE's response is, you know, we're increasing this with investments in more tree cutting and pruning and things like that.
What's the main, is it that the grids are outdated, or there's just more demand? I know DTE raised the hourly the rates of electricity between 2 and 7 during the summer hours to try to encourage people not to use a lot of electricity during those hours.
Yeah, I think there's been a real underinvestment in the in DTE's infrastructure. It's old, it's outdated, it hasn't been properly maintained, and it's something that we as a city are certainly going to the state with these rate increases and providing testimony and collecting the stories of residents about the types of service that that residents are facing, because what we're seeing is much greater frequency of outages here in Southeast Michigan and in Ann Arbor than there are in other places of the country. And so we have a problem. So we're trying in one way to address it through sort of how the Michigan Public Services Commission and the state legislature might be able to intervene, because we really don't have an ability to change how the DTE operates. We are then simultaneously pursuing a feasibility study around the development of a separate sustainable energy utility or a municipal utility that would provide either complementary or sort of take over the, you know, basically us becoming having a municipal utility that instead of having DTE. And so we're taking a look. We should get the results of that study within the next couple of months, so we can understand sort of that these are not small steps for a community to take. And so we really need to have the data and the numbers about what rates would be, how feasible this is, you know, next steps before we would make any decisions about what would come next. And
just a very quick plug before we end. You have a coffee hour. Could you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah.
And then we're done.
Okay, well, thanks. Yeah, so Councilmember Cornell and I host monthly coffee hours or constituent meetings. Typically they're on the third Sunday of the month at 4 p.m. at the Ann Arbor Arts Center. And you can find information on my website, ericafor2.com, where we post kind of when the next meeting's going to be, and folks can sign up for the newsletter that I send out twice a month to residents, letting them know what's going on.
So you're always hearing from constituents.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, and you've certainly helped us update a lot of information.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me and doing these.
Remember to join us for a new episode every month. We want to hear from you, so please email us at ctn@a2gov.org. Attention, Ward Talk. You can also follow CTN and ask questions on Twitter at twitter.com/CTN Ann Arbor. We'll make sure to include your questions. To watch this and all other CTN's programming, head online to youtube.com/CTN Ann Arbor. For Ward Talk, I'm Bonnie Gabowitz. Until next month.